Yes, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another fantastic edition of Storytime. This is what adults do when the world around them begins to crumble apart and society starts to tear at itself. We either cry or we laugh. And here on Storytime, we decided to just follow the truth wherever it may lead us. Now, of course, the truth is a difficult thing to find, so it's difficult to say the truth. I mean, if what I was saying was absolute fact, we would call it fact time, not story time. So take of everything I tell you this evening with a pinch of salt or two, and instead try and look at the forest, not just the wood and the trees. That is our aim here at Storytime. Basically, it's our weekly little gathering where we get together and we talk about all kinds of interesting things that relate to our history and our geopolitics that we see today. And these two things kind of like smoosh up together, and then you find kind of us in between, talking some random stuff and trying to see if we can make sense of the world. And at the same time, obviously talking about all the little interesting threads that weave us all in some kind of intricate tapestry. So sit back, relax, do enjoy yourselves. Tonight, for those of you that are closer on the latter side of midnight, tonight we're going to be talking about, I had a whole bunch of really interesting questions from our previous story time. So thank you all for just engaging, and I encourage you to do so. You got our Discord. You can always pop in there and let us know what's up. You know, kind of you can come in there live and drop in your comments. You know, we're an open book here, as it were. So we do encourage questions, and you did have many good ones. So before I jump into many of them, what I want to talk about in Storytime 9 kind of links all of these things together. The questions I had were around, well, firstly, what do I think these objects, these UAPs were, or are, in the sense, because it's an ongoing phenomena. And there was also a question about continuation of governments. Now, if you're on the American side of the pond, you would call it continuity of government. And basically, we left Storytime 8 talking about how this secret, almost most secret section of the military that is designed to withstand just cataclysmic devastation in the case of some kind of, let's call it emergency, that's how they term it, emergency. At that time that they were considering these things, it was obviously nuclear war, but we'll see how diluted that has become over time. But basically, that's what you're looking at, is a group of unelected officials that basically, at the declaration of a whatever kind of catastrophe they either come across or create, who knows, question mark, can suddenly enact all these emergency powers and completely turn our concept of the, let's say the American concept of the Constitution and freedoms and stuff like that, completely on its head. As I mentioned here in Storytime, you know, we do sort of look to America often in these cases as a case example. And the reason for that is because, one, they have an amazing transparency layer. So we do have a lot more access. And obviously being English, it does give us a good mirror into the apex, basically. The apex being, you know, who is one of like the most hectic people that would be undertaking these incredible endeavors to not only withstand catastrophic, you know, barrages of nuclear or other kinds of weaponry from enemies, foreign and domestic, but to also retaliate. So either way, it basically amounts to the annihilation of all life on the planet. Not all, but let's say 99% of it. And that 1% left would be the elite, not the beautiful trees and animals and all the other bioorganisms that share this lovely planetoid with us. So that's why we kind of call it a doomsday cult. And I'm going to tie this, questions around continuation of government. I want to try and give you guys an example of what we're kind of looking at, where it sort of came from, and how this ties in to this doomsday concept. And the other really important point we're going to try and make in Storytime 9, this episode you are joining us with now this evening. Thank you all for being here. The real point we're going to try and finish on is just to try and explain there is a not only human and psychological aspect to considering the annihilation of all life on the planet that military people take. But there is, at the same time, for those of you that might agree with me, there is also a spiritual aspect or dimension to that. And you will see often that the kind of spirituality that maybe most humans have of universal laws, such as, have consideration, do not harm others unless in self-defense, do not take what is not yours. These like things that you can apply to any person at any place at any time as just like a really good blanket rule. These are called golden rules, universal rules, rules that when you apply them to everyone, they're kind of quite good. But if a rule is not universal and it's only for some people and then not for others, you find that it comes down to, at the end of the day, a bit of a belief system and a power system and a psychology, and all of that together weaves, as I say, an esoteric dimension to this kind of thing. And what we'll look at in story time, just to sort of make this point a bit clearer before we dive in, is just to say that there is, for example, if you look at Germany during World War II, whether it was the Anerbe Society or the Thule Society or any of the other esoterics, almost, parts of it were quite secret, rites and rituals, and their real integration into the military to find esoteric knowledge, let's put it that way. Because in a lot of esoterica, there is this talk of end times, because it also puts before us this question of what is our very nature? What happens then, What God will we face, if any? Just to put that as a general question. So this is an interesting thing to kind of highlight, is the people who are most capable of either attacking or defending, let's say America or Russia or China, are also often not only with such great military power, but behind their decisions of that military power, you'll see that there is a depth to it, because, as I say, our mortality, when brought before us, does bring deeper questions of why are we here, what is our purpose, and what do we think is right, the differences, and also between things like is and ought. Prescription and description. So for those of you joining us, as I say, in story time, we are going to be just linking a lot of these things together and really trying to paint a very interesting picture. So I hope you have your beverage of choice, and I hope you're buckled in. We got very interesting stuff to go through. Before we jump in, though, I think I want to talk about Elon Musk. Yes, sirree, Bob. I want to talk about Elon Musk. Good old Elon. He's been in the news lately, and he's been in the news because we've spoken about Elon a few times during our storytime sessions. One point we've made is that Elon is most definitely involved in levels of secrecy within the military-industrial complex. You can't put things in space that have military application, unless you've had men in dark suits kind of give you the nod. To put that as a bit of an allegory. But, there is clearances that you need. There are licenses that you need. And then, of course, there are national security dimensions that are obviously classified. And, the second point we made was that Elon sometimes plays a little bit both sides of the fence. And when I say both sides of the fence, on the one hand, he seems to be a very open-minded, free speech loving libertarian, and then on the other hand, sometimes he's like, yeah, well, I kind of put a couple of spy satellites that look down on us terrestrially, and who knows what they're doing, right? They're spy satellites though, so there's got to be something in that direction. And so, he says, and then of course, 3 is his. Although he seems like a well-wishing person, he also says, if anyone would know if there was aliens, it'd be me, and there aren't any aliens. I wish there were. Good old Elon. I love you to bits and pieces, but, we're in a different world now. The Senate is having UAP hearings very openly. You can cast into it live and watch as the military-industrial complex talk to some politicians, and we get little dribbles of declassified information. But when we look in that declassified information, I mean, I think I'm just to hammer this point home about Elon just saying that he's not a believer. Well, maybe not a believer. That's not not the correct statement. But he was saying, like, I've got a lot of stuff in space. I deal with space. I deal with all of this and that and that. And he's got many companies and engineering firms and technology behind him, and clearance. He deals with the military. He's like, I feel confident that if there was aliens, I'd know about it, and I'd tell you. Well, good old Elon, I'm here to tell you, because you would tell us is probably why you don't have knowledge of these kinds of things. But even then, I'm not convinced, because again, somebody should inform good old Elon of the kind of projects that are given to other companies like BARS, which is your Bigelow Aerospace. And we had, through Senator Harry Reid in the recent UAP hearings, and obviously, we sort of tracked that story. We come across the fact that we get a contract from Bigelow Aerospace showing the kind of things that they are tasked to do. They are producing deliverables on these kinds of technologies, and there's a whole pack. There's a whole pack of things that prospecting contractor would look at. The DIRD reports. In fact, let's pull one of these things up. I mean, just to sort of hammer this home. I mean, good old Elon. When you're let's do the briefing, I guess. Let me see if this is what we want. Yeah, this will do, Pig. This will do. Okay, so let's call this up on screen. So this is exhibit number 1. No, I'm just joking. All right, so as I was saying, Elon claims to be, and look, good on him for being a civilian, actually making a difference. We appreciate where good is done, but we want all the truth, not just some of it. And, if Elon doesn't know, someone should inform him that, things like this, which again are part of the declassified, or now unclassified, I guess is the term they would use for this kind of a document. This is from the DIA, given to the civilian subcommittee on armed services, and they get given this information because the politicians put pressure on them. And I think this was given to Harry Reid. Let's just give a quick, run through this. History, July 8th, supplements. Now, when we're talking about July 8th, we're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, this is 2001. Supplemental appropriation tasked something to study foreign advanced aerospace weapon threats from the present out to 40 years in the future. $10 million for finance. Oh, sorry, this is 2008. I've mixed a few studies up. So Bigelow Aerospace well, that makes it even worse. Hold on, let me just make that point. I thought that this was some other documents I had from more recently. If this was about 10 years ago, again, just keep in mind how long this stuff takes to come out, and some of it is still secret. But moving forward, Bigelow Aerospace won contract to study 11 technical areas. Okay. Emphasis on unconventional technologies. Aerospace contract status. Performance by Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. I love how they had to put the Bigelow Aerospace at the beginning, otherwise Advanced Space Studies would just be ass. But BAS has been excellent, and they are in full compliance with aerospace contract, whatever. So we had a look at that contract there. That's where they have to, also give deliverables, make patents, all these good things that really advance the secret aerospace programs. So extensive monthly status reports, 12 project management plans, detailed research reports. But then it starts to get a little bit more interesting. The Department of Defense Intelligence the Office of Defense Intelligence has executed option. So hold on, let me just jump right down. Here we go. Aerospace contract status continue. 12 million for the continuation of the contract, so lots more money. Contracting officer extended 30th September to financial year 2010. Operating at risk. Okay, so that means they're basically maybe putting forward a little bit of money there. But again, it's all special access, so the money for this is all off the books, basically. Part of the Senate committees are trying to find out who funds these things. How is this funded? But this is the part I wanted to show good old Elon. The technical report review results. Now each one of these points here comes with a technical document. In fact, we'll pull one of them up if you want. But listen to what they're busy. And I've got a version that has the authors and the papers, and you can read them in greater depth. But space-time modifications for space flight, pulsed power-based weaponry, gravity wave communication, wormholes in space-time, field effects on biological tissue, vacuum energy applications, maverick versus corporate research cultures, warp drives, metallic spintronics, high-energy laser weapons, quantum entanglement communications. And then we loved, obviously, the space access one, where they have this beautiful solid line going out into space and, other planets that they can travel to with their secret machines. Obviously, they've designed all kinds of things in the aerospace sector that can do quite incredible things if the data is to be believed. What we're trying to point out here is that Elon has been in the news recently for specifically giving the head of Twitter, or the sort of the lead role of Twitter, to a lady from the cloth and cut of the World Economic Forum. And that's very, very interesting. And as I say, Elon is a bit of a dark horse in some regards. On one hand, he talks free speech, and on the other hand, he has, a place for the FBI and Twitter, he says, these kinds of things. There's much to unpack there. But what I would want to say is when Elon Musk says, I would know if there's no aliens, I would ask him, do you have knowledge of these aerospace defense contracts and what they're working on? And have you even studied remotely some of the hearings and the evidence and the metamaterials? And we're at a point, as I say, where even the Pentagon is saying a percentage of this phenomena is unknown to us. We don't know what it is. We're not going to say aliens, but it's probably aliens or something like that, Obviously, I'm being a little bit facetious there, but this is why it's important to hold people of power, even Elon Musk, to a high standard. You know, if you're going to say we must have free speech, but Alex Jones cannot be on my platform because he had his own trials and tribulations in the court systems, of which he's, there's a system for that. But this platform, no, thank you very much. And then you're looking at, other people that are saying, look, I'm celebrating having X number of abortions because I'm so free. And some of these abortions happen at very late terms. So you kind of wonder, where is the balance in all of this? And who really is Elon Musk at the end of the day? Of course, when he shows up, I think it was at Halloween, with his, I don't know, I think it was like some plated armor in red, and then on it had this like, symbol of like Baphomet or Satan or something. Let's pull that up, shall we? Elon. I mean, I just want to have a look at it, just to sort of, I know all in jest and things like that, but, and I'm not trying to knock on Elon. I'm just trying to point out that there's this duality, and everyone's free to explore. But as I say, with Elon and people like him, we have to hold them to a slightly higher standard when it comes to their responsibilities that affect us. In other words, having satellites that look down on us, possible, spying and weapon systems, or, bunkers underneath us through the boring thing, or brains that are hacked through Neuralink. Or we have to keep in mind that these are dangers as well as tools. So that's why we have to be sure of which side of the fence we kind of fall on there. Let's see here if I can pull up a picture of it. And at the same time, we're also going to have a look at this news about Elon Musk and who he's hired. This is important because the person he's hired has quite a lot to do with this occult elitism of control and domination that leads to these very strange belief systems almost that some of the elite follow. And not only the elite, but if you look at even people like George Washington and other great military leaders and politicians, they're part of Skull and Bones, or the Masons, or the Rosicrucians, or this stuff is still alive and well. There's movies made about such things. So without further ado, let's try to get a more get a slightly better quality picture, shall we? Yes. There is obviously something important to these people to sometimes display their belief systems in some way. Maybe not their belief systems, but sometimes it's important for them to kind of display to the world certain things. Now, again, I'm not saying that this is the case with Elon. Maybe he was just having some fun and he dressed up like this has a very particular name. I think it's like the Guardian of the Dark Lord or something, the Rising of the Dark Lord or something like that. It's cute, but it's also at a time when we're hyper aware of Elon and his intentions. And you kind of wonder, is this on purpose or was this just really misguided, you kind of wonder. And of course you can see people say, oh, that's not satanic. I'm like, dude, there's an upside down cross there. Like, it's a pentagram. You can, you make of that what you will. Now, again, I'm not particularly of any staunch organized religion, but I will say that symbols are sometimes important to elites, and that's why when Elon starts to do good things, we praise him and we say, free speech to some is fantastic, and it's great that to a large degree we've had a bit more transparency on the side of Twitter, and we've seen a lot of the Twitter files and the Fauci files and all of this coming out of Twitter. It's great. It's great that we've had some kind of accountability, but it's not good when it's rules for thee but not for me, because then we really need to trust. Like Julius Caesar perhaps was seen as, although he crossed the Rubicon and broke laws and basically turned the republic into a dictatorship, totalitarianism, as it were. Many saw him as a very just and competent leader, more than the corrupt Senate that was bringing Rome to its knees. But the judge of character it's hair thin. And as we know, Caesar ended up being murdered by his own Senate, with Brutus, the last one to stab him. So, it's hair thin, the judgment a person makes between what they think is good for everyone and what they choose to do for themselves in the light of the public eye. So that's why we scrutinizing Elon's remarks here, and why we're going to tie this back to continuation of government, because these people are really on a different level. And when I say that, I mean, not only are they dealing with some of the highest levels of technology, not only are they part of and have access to some of the highest levels of finance and education and all these resources, but they also come from a long line of people that have had access to resources and politicians and have funded both sides of wars and have really stayed out of the public eye, that in some sense bring about the changes that we are sometimes unaware of. If you understand the game, you'll play it well. If you're like you and me and you're trying to make a living, you don't have time to play that, rich man's game, as it were. And anyway, so let's get to the news just quickly before we really roll into Storytime 9. For everyone joining us, thank you so much. This is Storytime 9, and we're looking at how Elon has recently made CEO of Twitter a new person. And this is sort of like breaking news. It's Linda Yaccarino, a very Italian-sounding name, but she is an American lady, if I'm not mistaken. And Linda Yaccarino is an interesting person. So she was obviously involved with NBC, but now she will also be the executive officer of the X-Corp and Twitter. Now, the X-Corp is something super, super interesting. It wants to kind of become the everything app. A one-stop stop for everything relating to our day-to-day business. You want to buy something, you want to go somewhere, you need medical this, you need finance that. It wants to be sort of like a WeChat on steroids. For those of you that know the social credit score system in the People's Republic of China, you might also think that that's not the greatest thing, even if they may be promised to do it in a different way. Just the general principle of being able to be cut off and turned off. If you ask any Canadian protester in the trucking protest, you're again just a button away from being unplugged from your bank account or your PayPal, or having your business shut down or your license taken away. There's many ways that coercion can be placed upon people to force them into a certain point of view. But what I really want to point out is this this person, Linda Yaccarino. She is also one of the big faces and figures in the World Economic Forum. In fact, there's a whole web page about her. In fact, let's pull it up, shall we? There's a whole web page about her on the whiff website. Now, it doesn't mean much, but you will see very quickly if you just start doing a bit of searching that she is very much involved in all kinds of strategic spaces, let's call them. And she's a very big believer in the World Economics Forum's principles, which for some of us, we've sort of explored in story times before, looking at the Georgia Guidestones and this desire to sort of keep the human population at a very low level. And that's great, but, where does 90 or 70 or 50% of the planet go? And the answer is often not very pleasant, because there's a lot of evidence and stories that come out and suggest to us that, let's just put it this way: if a government wanted to slowly make us more infertile, want us to have less children, perhaps gave us medicines that were not good for us, and if they maybe thought other bogus things like experimental products. I don't know what you can call them, what they say they are on the package, but all these kinds of things, laced with experimental technologies that might not be good for you, with pollution and climate change and all these things that can be engineered, along with social unrest, along with public places being targeted. All these things are dangers that people like Linda Yaccarino and her ilk will tell us about. What I'm trying to highlight there is that you have people that are able to not only create the solutions, but the problems for these solutions, that they are then the ones that gain from, being there to save the day. And this is why we're wary when Elon chooses someone like Yaccarino for the position of not only Twitter, which is supposed to be a free speech platform according to Musk, but also we see that she's head of the X-Corp, and that's quite interesting. Let's first just pull up this website here. So I'm going to read this in just a sec, but the point I just wanted to finish there was, when you have a bunch of really powerful people in places that guide national policy in a way that a country itself cannot resist or in some way avoid, we see that there are what we call in politics supranational entities. That supra means more than the state level. In other words, something bigger than the state, more powerful, more authoritative in some sense. And when people in these kinds of strategic places of power begin to make plans for us, whether it's continuation of government or Agenda 2021 or Agenda 2030 now, we really have to, as I say, hold these people to a very strict level of accountability and transparency, because if left to their own devices, they wheel and deal amongst themselves and make laws for the other people, and then for themselves retain every freedom. If you can think back to Obama's birthday, where he had, I think it was up to about, I'll be mistaking this number, but I think it was about 500 guests, and all the servants had masks, but the guests didn't have to. And you kind of just wonder, like, why? Are the elite special that they don't need masks? They don't have problems getting infected like regular human beings? Or is it just rules for thee but not for me? This is what we have to be aware of. So let's just quickly read this, because, as I say, it's important when we see these people guiding our policy mechanisms. In other words, political entities, sometimes not always a government, sometimes it's, US aid or Doctors Without Borders or the white helmets. But these things are sometimes used as political tools and are not really there to do what they say they are. And that's where counterintelligence and subterfuge and all these things muddy the waters and make us more divided as people instead of coming together as humanity to try and solve problems. The point I'm just trying to make here is that this elite group has access to money, technology, and power, and they have laws that favor them and disadvantage us, and we pay with taxes many of their caprices in some way. So they form a cocoon of protections that allow them to live a different kind of life. Whilst we'll be eating bugs, they'll be eating Wagyu beef, and they'll throw it away because they have so much of it and don't care. Now, that's my belief because I've seen how power can corrupt so absolutely, both in the annals of history and in my lifetime with my own eyes. People can do some really terrible things because they think they're above the law, or they think they're better than other people. And that's when they stop looking for options to bring humanity to a higher level of consciousness. And their belief system, as I say, has this occult tinge to it sometimes. And that's why when they're making doomsday plans or plans for how we're going to run cities or how you may or may not leave your house, you must be very aware of the fact that their belief system is centered around a kind of twisting of ancient teachings. Ancient technology in the form of the scriptures and the buildings and the ancient sites, the megaliths as it were. I call these a technology because they have with them embedded information that requires a high degree of understanding. And I want to bring this aspect in and finish off Storytime 9 with this point. Just really trying to hammer home also that part of this UFO military political espionage business comes down to a bunch of elites that have a belief system. And part of that belief system goes back into ancient times, and that's where we begin to find an incredible dimension of not only psychology but parapsychology and occultism and spirituality and metaphysics and all kinds of really amazing things that start to look at the core of the nature of reality. And that's I think what makes the military very open to studying things like technical remote viewing and just any kind of technology that can be applied for a military use. And I think that they're very into these kinds of psychological weapons, let's call them, because a lot of the people that run these programs have a deep understanding of the mystery schools, in other words, the old occult knowledge that has come to us through the priesthoods of the ancients and the survivors of cataclysms. And they speak to us through their texts and through these buildings that are left behind that we still to this day struggle to replicate, and their scriptures often struggle to understand the vastness of their knowledge. And so this ties it all together. There's this almost breakaway society of ultra rich and powerful that have with them technologies that can take them anywhere and make them possibly live, extended periods of time. And we're not all invited to that party. And what you might end up with there is a breakaway society. And we can speculate on that, but we know that something similar is happening right beneath our feet, or in military hangars in these special access programs. Because just looking at that first document we saw of Bigelow Aerospace's contract, I mean, when you got a company that is so dark in the black projects that it's dealing with, quantum communications and warp wormholes and things like that, you must know that there are people that have capabilities that you and I have not the foggiest clue about, and it allows them to do things that can fool us very easily. Imagine if you went back 500 years and you produced a cell phone or an Alexa or some kind of like interesting technology like a laptop or a Starship or something like that, SpaceX Starship. These people would think you were a god. Their ability to understand that level of technology puts them at a major evolutionary disadvantage. And that's what we're trying to keep our eye on with the elites, and why we must hold them accountable, because we want technology to benefit all of humanity, not just the ones in power that are able to keep the military secret in the way the military wants it done, and leaving the rest of us sort of to fight over fossil fuels, but then telling us we must limit our amount of meat that we're able to buy to, I think it was 13 or 15 kilograms a year. I mean, who are these people? Who do they think they are? Now, I'm not a big carnivore or anything like that, but I mean, just anytime the government tells you what you may put in your body, alarm bells just need to go to maximum level. Let's read about Linda Yacarino quickly. So, Chairman, Advertising Partnerships, NBC Universal, oversees on all marketing strategies, advertising revenue for the company totaling nearly 10 billion. Leading over 1,400 employees. Help numerous organizations navigate increasingly competitive and disruptive circumstances. Okay, so that sounds like Twitter at the moment, right? Innovative, sustainable, and winning positions. Visionary leader, envisioned executive company, and industry-level transformation. So there you go, industry-level transformation. Trying to get Twitter to the level of the X-Corporation that she's now also CEO of, to try and get all these products into one app or company or something like that. So she's worked for Ashina Retail Group, Hulu, Ad Council, OpenAP, Mobile Marketing Association, and many others. But basically, she's a very good businesswoman, but she is, of the Schwabian cult, which is, again, people must pay the price for the otherwise questionable damage that is caused. So, in other words, whether you're looking at anything, whether it's climate or health or we'll have all kinds of crises. We'll have a cyber crisis. We'll have a food crisis. But a lot of these things come from very poor strategy making. And it's been going on for so long that you're saying, well, either these people are extremely stupid for so long, or they're really brilliant and they're doing it on purpose and low key, trying to just make the rest of us plebs basically depopulate ourselves is I think their hope. And to bring down that mighty number so that they can be gods of a paradise with control of the skies and the earth and everything above and below it. This is I know this sounds a bit bizarre, but remember that when you are in a place of this kind of power, you're not looking at the world the same kind of way. You see a store, you don't think what's in it. You don't see the people as people. What you're seeing is just products and people that buy the product. The amount of money you have is more than certain countries at times. And then you get put into positions of power like the United Nations or the International Monetary Fund or the International Bank of Settlements. And suddenly you have more power than a country in a certain sense. You tell them what they must do with their cows or their milk or their tomatoes. And that's the European Union that I'm making a bit of a jab there at. And before you know it, the government has taken away all your rights. And if you don't follow suit, problems may arise. Problems may arise. So it's a bit of a long-winded thing, but it's important to put this on the. It's important to put this kind of on the record and say, you know, Elon, as much as we love him, this move of making Linda Yaccarino head of both Twitter and CEO of both Twitter and the X-Corporation, which he hopes to make this everything app. It's no wonder he's had such a huge backlash, because the World Economic Forum, we find their policies bending society to really breaking points, and that's why we're not happy about it. And Elon has had, you know, rightfully so, quite a bit of backlash. So we'll see where that goes. And we want to mention Elon for two reasons with regards to continuation of government. One was that he's picked someone like Linda Yaccarino from the World Economic Forum, and the World Economic Forum is one of many entities of people that can really command our lives, not just guide our political, you know, ship, but really command it from the shadows. And we're talking like Bilderberg level, Trilateral Commission level, the Club of Rome, you know, Bohemian Grove. All of these kinds of places are where rich and famous and influential meet to make ideas about the future. And again, we're not invited. And, you know, this is important because when we go back to continuation of government, we see the same kind of thing. It's ultra secret. It's a huge smoke and mirror program, because you can't know how your government is going to try and survive a doomsday event, is what they call. And the plans they have supersede all laws. When asked in Congress, a senator said, well, what does this mean for our Constitution? You know, the person kind of looked at them and said, well, that's a question to be looked at. Basically saying, well, that's a problem. You know, Constitution might not be as supreme as we think, which again is not legal. The Constitution is supposed to be the supreme law of the land in most countries. And so not only does Elon have something like the Boring Company and a CEO from the World Economic Forum and Neuralink, and you know, his brother Kimball has these huge factories that produce food hydroponically. We can see that these are technologies that might drive us forward, but they might also enslave our mind, enslave our food, enslave our economic ability to thrive as humans. We therefore have to, again, be careful. So let's talk a little bit about continuation of government. Everyone, welcome to Storytime 9. We're talking a little bit about how the continuation of government is this group of people who, in their own way, form a cocoon of secrecy around this secret plan that will kick in at the time of an emergency. Before, it was just a nuclear attack, you know, deep bunkers underground to try and like stop the Soviets from, you know, performing a decapitation strike. But it's expanded to something more than that, and that's what we're going to look at. And continuation of government, as I say, is a group of very elite, not just rich people, but people of military, political, and industrial influence. These are the people that kind of run things from the shadows, even though we can't really elect them. You know, they belong to companies and the boards of, you know, the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and again, all these other institutions. So let us start with continuation of government. What is, if, as I said, the Americans refer to continuity of government? It is basically, as we said, the plan that a government makes, well, mostly the military makes, for ensuring that the governments can produce political effects even after a devastating attack, the worst attack possible. Now, a lot of people will say, oh yes, I remember, Obama during the one passing meteor was taken to Denver, and oh yes, I remember Cheney was taken to, I think it was Cheyenne Mountain during 9/11, or whatever the case is. We kind of hear about these bunkers, and one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, and Mount Weather being the one, and Cheyenne Mountain on the other, and then a score of deep military underground bunkers. And from this continuation of government's topic, you'll see as we begin to unfold them, you'll see that there is more mystery than fact. And again, when we're dealing with people who are apex in terms of either predator or savior, we have to be very careful about what's running our world. Now, this concept of continuation of governments, although it sounds useful, it's already starting off on a bad foot, on a false premise, because already it's coming from the premise of, well, if I attack you, you'll attack me, we'll just destroy everything, and that is a very likelihood. It's a very high likelihood of that happening, because humans are, we make mistakes, we not always perfect decision makers, and sometimes we're vindictive, sometimes we just wake up and have a bad day. So the calculations that the militaries had made in the past said, well, it's going to happen. One way or another, it's going to happen. This nuclear strike is going to happen, so we need to start preparing. And it needs to be secret, because if the enemy know, obviously, then our plan won't work. So that's why they gave it the highest levels of secrecy. And this is why you also see that it begins to slowly begin to zip together with the aerospace and the military secret technologies. Because it's the secret technologies that allow them to make, when we say deep underground military bunkers, we're not talking about bunker buster, 1 or 2 kilometers underground. We're talking about 40, 50 kilometers underground. What makes these kinds of things? We'll look at that just now, because many people don't know that some of the largest tunnels that have been bored have not come from Elon Musk's boring company. They've come from the United States Air Force and their conflagrators and that sort of thing. So we'll look at that in just a moment, but you can see that there is great industrial capacity from the military to build, or just whatever they think is necessary. They can, if anyone is going to find the best way to do it, I guess that is why we call them the military. They are militant in the way that they will achieve a goal. Sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. But the point is that these apex technologies that are trying to protect the continuation of government are just a bit of a ruse, in fact, to just continue not only secrecy and secret programs and underground bunkers and stuff like that, but it's also to make sure that they are still, and I mean with they, the military, are the big dog. Basically, when continuation of government kicks in, people think that, oh, the military will come and save me. But really, they're coming to enslave you. If you're a politician, even the president, you are unaware of where you're being taken, and from that point, what will happen? There are things called presidential executive orders that are secret, PEADs, and we'll look at them in just a moment. So presidents do have some influence, but we don't really know. And again, if the president had influence, why would he even or she even consider violating the Constitution, which is the thing that basically brought them into office. This is all sounding a little bit difficult to kind of put in focus. So let's get our teeth into this, shall we? So as we said, continuation of government rests on these things called deep events, as Peter Dale Scott would say. And as time has gone by and the military-industrial complex has insidiously inserted itself into politics and industry and the media, it's expanded. And now anything can be really considered an emergency. And we'll see that at the end, where even a cyber attack can be an emergency that can trigger continuation of government. As I said, Obama was put into a bunker because we weren't sure if this one this one asteroid was gonna pass by safely, or if the recent calculations were with a little margin of error. And of course, we didn't know about it until it happened. So that's just like a small example. But I think a good way to kind of maybe sink our teeth into continuation of government is really look at the few programs that we do know that really kind of highlight this whole kind of affair, in a sense. Because, although this started back, I mean, we can literally say this goes as far back as, kings and queens of ancient times. It's kind of a form of succession. If I die as king, not to worry, the kingdom will not fall. We know who's going to lead us forward. If there was no succession, the kingdom would fall into chaos and disrepute. Now, although that was like ancient times, we see it slowly evolving through time. And mostly when we become industrialized and we begin to create warfare, and that warfare begins to escalate to a point where we can practically not only destroy each other, but the whole world itself, you'll see that this concept grows and extrapolates itself. Now, a lot of people say, oh, this is the shadow government, because these are the people that will save themselves and everyone else will be washed away in disaster. But there is a difference, as I say, whether you use the word deep state or shadow government, or basically you need to just know that it's a club that you're not invited to. And sometimes it's military people, sometimes it's politicians, sometimes it's the elites. That's why when we look at these Bilderbergs and other, Davos groups, it's interesting, the kind of groups that come together to make plans. But again, just going back to continuation of government, although this goes all the way back, as I say, to ancient times, you see the expansion through the National Defense Authorization Act, which really kicked in from September 11th, 9/11, when the planes hit the Twin Towers in New York. That day the world changed in many ways, and this was one of them. The kind of authority powers that we now loosely call the Patriot Act also came with it things like Homeland Security. And, the Americans never referred to America as the as the homeland before that point. But now this office has, sort of changed their view, because now it's domestic terrorists possibly within the country, not just outside of it, right? So September 11th happens, the continuation of government really takes a huge boost, and eventually it all gets sealed by Obama at the end of the day. Because really, his presidential decrees and his final signatures basically cemented continuation of government into into the federal system. So, as I say, although we'll see traces of continuation of government all the way back from World War I and II and further back, it really pops up to us now in modern times through things like the UFO threat. Because again, that could be another thing when NORAD suddenly decides continuation of government needs to kick in place, and General von Herk will, take over and he will be our supreme leader because we'll be under military martial law. And that's a pretty scary thing because, who is von Herk and who is going to be his successor? Or, these people aren't elected, they're military people. And okay, granted, we need a response in times of an emergency, but as I was saying, a lot of the times these people create half the emergencies we find. And you can easily see any kind of illegal behavior from the intelligence companies. The CIA is known as the company, but the intelligence agencies like the CIA, who illegally assassinate or create plots and coups, basically. This kind of illegal activity is not supposed to be exalted and given medals, and militaries should strictly be used defensively. And I'm saying this because this kind of cowboy-like intelligence breakaway law unto itself ties in very much with this concept of secrecy of an elite group that know and the rest don't. And not only that, but people that have access to technologies and real forces of power to make all kinds of interesting things happen. So when continuation of government really cements itself through Obama after 9/11, anything like a cyber attack or a UFO attack can be misconstrued as an emergency that will trigger continuation of government. And as I said, we've got things like, for example, called talking plasma. Basically, talking plasma is intersecting laser beams that are pulsed, that basically make a light source in the sky visible to the eye. And funny enough, it moves around like a laser pointer. So a lot of these UAP phenomena that we see, it can easily be replicated by the militaries or whatever, companies would have this technology, whoever's part of these special programs. And these plasma balls will even show up on radar, will show up on, so they'll visually be seen, they'll picked up electro-optically, and they'll show up on the radio telemetry, so they look like UFO file, or like things that would go inside the UFO file. However, they just, intersecting lasers from a military project. So, there's a very interesting story time we'll do specifically about this topic called, well, I don't know what the story time will be called, but the topic itself is kind of personified by Project Blue Beam. So not Project Blue Book, which we've looked at previously through the MJ12 documents and a look at the understanding we have of the UFOs and ET, or extraterrestrial biological beings. But Project Blue Beam was a kind of a sci-fi version of Operation Northwoods. So to remind you, Northwoods, let's call that up on screen, shall we? So Operation Northwood was concocted by the CIA and other parts of the military to try and fake their way into a war with Cuba. So let's pull this straight off the Wikipedia, because now it's been so debunked, not debunked, but the fact of it being conspiracy has been so debunked that it's now accepted as fact that even you can read this very openly on Wikipedia. So that's why we sometimes like to have a good laugh there. And you'll see that although Operation Northwoods, again, was this false flag operation against American citizens that originated in the Department of Defense, proposal was for the CIA to stage and commit acts of violent terrorism against American military and civilian targets, blaming them on the Cuban government. And then how were they going to do this? They were going to take some planes, and they were going to fly them into things or blow them up, but basically there were variations of the plan where sometimes they would, get remote planes, and other times the plane might just have people on it. Who knows? So this is what Kennedy came across, and when he saw this, he was just absolutely, he didn't know what to make of this. He said, how inhumane, well, he didn't say, but in paraphrasing a lot of his comments on this, he sort of says, you guys are crazy. I want to tear you up into 1,000 pieces and scatter you to the wind for this and the Bay of Pigs and all this illegal shenanigans that are going on here from not only the CIA but the intelligence services. And you will see that Operation Northwoods is a very sort of similar. It's kind of like a very similar psy-op that can be done, because Project Bluebeam is also a way for the government to make people believe that an alien invasion, or that aliens have somehow, well, they can mix it however they want. But basically, Project Bluebeam was one of the projects that they worked on to try and fake whatever kind of alien intervention, invasion, visit that they want. They can make lights in the sky, they can project sounds in the minds of people. And all of this is to stage some kind of emergency so the continuation of government can kick in, This is why we need to be, again, extremely cautious when we look at these elite people, because they can create the very problem that they promise to be the solution for. And when they do this and kick in continuation of government, things like Rex 84 happen. Let's actually wait. Before we look at Rex 84, there was one that came before that. Let's look at Operation Garden Plot. There we go. Operation Garden Plot. Looks like it's got a thing on Wikipedia, so we'll have a look at that. So, as I say, when these runaway rogue cowboy agencies and aspects inside the intelligence and military shadow government or deep state begin running rampant and doing whatever they want, they'll come up with things like this. The Department of Defense Civil Disturbance Plan was known by the cryptonym Garden Plot. Was a general U.S. Army and National Guard plan to respond to major domestic civil disturbances within the United States. Now, this is in the 60s, right? Think about that. That's the time of Kennedy. That's the time of MLK. That's the time of John Lennon. These people were creating social revolution, trying to unite people and trying to promote war, not promote war, and get us back to the concepts of love and peace, the hippies of the 60s. But instead, what they got was the United States Northern Command, NORTHCOM. It provided federal military and law. It provided the federal military and law enforcement assistance. Let me try that again. It provided federal military and law enforcement assistance to local governments during times of major civil disturbances. The Garden Plot plan, drafted under the Watts, Newark, and Detroit riots. After the Watts, Newark, and Detroit riots. Captures the acrimonious times when the document was drawn up. The plot was against racial unrest as well as at the anti-draft and anti-Vietnam elements. The Pentagon activated Garden Plot to restore order during the 1992 Los Angeles riots. Garden Plot was superseded by U.S. NORTHCOM's concept plan, which so hilariously is called Con Plan. Like, if ever they were going to con us of some kind of threat and then take away our rights, it's so funny that they would actually call it the Con Plan. So Con Plan 2502. And again, as they mentioned here, it follows the September 11th attacks under the Homeland Security restructuring. So, as I said, this Garden Plot was a response to the civil disobedience that they were finding. They were basically fighting a losing war. People didn't know why they were in Vietnam. They were drafting young men and sending them off to die. And, there was a big upsurge in racial and just freedom rights. We wanted America to heal to being the beacon, to heal from their wars and their the deep kind of problems they were having politically at the time. And they were trying to find, at least the people were trying to find some kind of coming together. And instead, what they got was the Department of Defense and Civil Disturbance Plan, which basically allowed local governments, law enforcement, military, and federal police and the intelligence agencies to basically not only arrest people, but to round them up and to do whatever was necessary to kind of quell these things. And these kinds of things are important, because when the American military or any kind of military rolls in to do the job of the civilian police, you've got a problem. And I'll say that because in South Africa, we have that problem. When we had our riots here through some political problems, when we tried to arrest Jacob Zuma, we had a couple of provinces in our country that burst into riots. And interestingly, these were the provinces where they were strongly supported by Jacob Zuma's party. But the point is that it got so widespread, and also because we have such unfortunate poverty here and so many people that are struggling, many normal people join in these lootings and riots as well. And so it got out of hand so quickly that we had to call in the military. And even they, just kind of defended, strategic points and infrastructure. But in many cases, civilians were left to sort of fend for themselves. The point I'm trying to make here is that when the military is doing the policing or being the politicians, trying to tell you how to run your life, you've got a problem. Something's gone very, very pear-shaped. And so that's the problem with continuation of governments. And I want to maybe just talk about, here we go, Rex 84. This is another small example of what continuation of government looks like. This was the readiness exercise of 1984 and was a classified scenario, okay? It was a scenario and drill developed by the United States. So this is like a plan that they had. If this, then we can do that. It's kind of like a war game that they had on the back burner, just in case something like this would happen. It goes to show what they were sort of thinking about around 1987. The plan was first revealed in detail in a major daily newspaper by reporter Alfonso Shardi of the Miami Herald. It basically speaks of a roundup that were reported to be widespread opposition to U.S. military invasion abroad, such as if the United States were to directly invade Central America. So basically, if they were going to invade, they were going to round up subversive people that were going to maybe be against that, or do anything that the government perceived as, here it says, subversive activities. This plan also authorized the military to direct ordered movements of civilian populations at state and regional levels, according to Professor Diana Reynolds. So they were able to round up and displace people. Imagine, and we know that this has been done before when, with the attack of Pearl Harbor, many Japanese Americans were rounded up and put into concentration camps because there was fears, So these ideas are in the back of the minds of the military all the time, and they are secret, and we only find out about them a little bit later. But the current continuation of government plan, we don't really know about. And let's just go a little bit further with the readiness exercise of 1984, Rex 84 as it was known. So existence of master military contingency plans, which Rex 84 was a part of, similar exercises like Operation Garden Plot, Lantern Spike, were originally revealed by Ron Riddenhauer, who summarized his findings in an article in Counterspy. Transcripts from the Iran-Contra hearings in 1987 record the following dialogue between Congressman Jack Brooks, Oliver North's attorney Brendan Sullivan, and Senator Daniel Inouye. And now I just want to point out that Daniel Inouye is one of the senators that is part of the UAP subcommittee hearing. So, he's one of the people that have been working on getting some of these things disclosed and unclassified. Or declassified, or whatever the case is. But let's just read this short. Let's just read this short, because this is that transcript I was telling you about a congressman asking, what happens to our rights, the supreme rights of the law of the land. So Congressman Jack says, Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of major disaster? Sullivan replies, Mr. Chairman, Senator Daniel Inouye, I believe that the question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you do not touch upon that? Okay. Brooks then replies, I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers that several others that there have been a plan developed by some agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was an area in which he had worked. I believe that it was, and I wanted to get this confirmation. I believe that it was, and I wanted to get this confirmation. And then Inouye says, may I most respectfully request that the matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, certain arrangements can be made for an executive session. Okay. Contingency plans by the US governments for rounding up people perceived by the government to be subversive or a threat to civil order have existed for many decades. For example, from 1967 to 1971, there was the FBI with the 8X list, and so on and so on and so on. Continuation of government, ladies and gentlemen, is a scary thing. And I want to link this quickly to the Doomsday Cult, because this is where we're going to wrap this all up. Continuation of governments, as I said, nowadays, because of 9/11, which again is an event, a deep event that we still have questions about, like what really happened there, you know? We need to see that that could have been, again, something like a false flag, like Operation Northwoods, that changes the laws, that allows these people to supersede our freedoms and change the world overnight on an emergency that they themselves have created and claim to be the only ones that are able to solve the problem. Because, you know, they've spent all the money, they've run all the committees, they've passed all the laws. So we need to be on the ball with this. And the real scary part of continuation of governments is that a lot of these people are either involved in dark projects, you know, highest secrecy level projects, which involve, as I say, a dark entity that is very able to not only destroy the credibility of anyone that's threatening the secret, but even the lives of people who have wanted to know the truth or have threatened to, you know, leak information or investigate it. So the secrecy around continuation of government and the people involved in it often point to an elite. And when they are thinking about these highest order strategies, because literally there's nothing more important than the destruction of everything and how to deal with that, you know, they're thinking about annihilation, mutually assured destruction, MAD, in the Soviet times during the Cold War, was basically knowledge that we could destroy the world. So any attack was just automatically gonna make the world a miserable place for everyone. But now we are moving into an age where we have deep military underground bunkers and technologies that can maybe take us off-world, and we have ways to possibly make humans in bags and artificial wombs and, you know, CRISPR genetics to our tailoring. We're really at the cusp of these amazing technologies that might make these crazy people think that they can maybe destroy the world and still survive, or be off the world when it collapses or something like that. A bit of a breakaway situation where whatever calamity occurs to you and I, but not to them, because they are in the know and are prepared. And continuation of government is an example of this, because we can actually see it in the laws. We can see it in the transcripts of Senator Daniel Inouye basically saying, you know, don't talk to me about this in public. Like, if you want, we can talk about this in an executive session that can be, you know, classified, but I can't talk to you about, will this suspend the American Constitution? That shouldn't even be up for discussion. And again, these elites have belief systems, just like every other human does. But these belief systems reinforce this idea that they have laws unto themselves, that they are special in their own way. And a lot of these belief systems go into occultism. Any kind of religion can be thought of as some kind of cult, and its symbology as some kind of occultism. But this goes back to the most ancient of traditions. And as I said at the beginning of the program, whether it's the Germans looking at the Atlantean stories of Aryans and things like that, or you look, today at many claiming to, not claiming, but keeping close to their chest the secrets of their bloodlines, and the kind of information that they hold in their vaults and their in their secret warehouses. This kind of knowledge about the origins of humanity and the fate of humanity comes with a religious tinge. And if you don't believe me, we're going to finish off with just one last thing to kind of try and highlight this for you. And this was the quote by Oppenheimer from the Bhagavad Gita, when they basically saw the atomic weapon detonated for the first time. He had that famous saying, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Let's actually listen to him, and let me try and square that circle for you guys. So let me just put it a little bit softer because it sounded super loud. Oh yeah. And then cool. Let's have a listen to good old Robert J. Oppenheimer.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Yep, those are some powerful words, and you can see he's being emotional at that point. And why I'm trying to point that out to you is, why is he recounting the ancient scriptures and the ancient stories of Vishnu and Krishna? It's because these people have a very deep, profound knowledge of not only the occult and the knowledge of the mystery schools, but those themselves have a degree of secrecy. And so you can see where the hand fits the glove perfectly with regards to secrecy in the military. A small group of people that keep the secret, sometimes even openly, but exert some kind of control over the future the guiding principle of humanity. They have control of the mechanisms of the future. This was the whole thing behind mystery schools and secret societies and things like that. They weren't just there to meet and have tea together. They were making plans about the future they saw. And this is where we link back to the death cult. And I'm gonna just because it's got its whole I don't want to go too in depth in the symbology and the thinking behind it. It's a whole story time unto itself. But as I said, the real point I wanted to make with Storytime 9 was not only show to you the continuation of government as a real thing that is a secret shadow of blankets, darkness that is over us at any moment, will change the world. Not only just America, but remember, America as a dominant military force would change politics and economics and technology forever for everyone. So again, what I'm saying is that not only have you got a very powerful force that can change all of humanity, but this force is making plans about some of the most destructive scenarios that they think are bound to happen. And it's that kind of thing that if you think of a thing is going to happen, you're kind of planning for it to happen in a certain sense. Or there's a degree where you become obsessed with it, and then it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy there. And these powerful people making these secret plans have with them this same cloth of secret knowledge, secret groups, need to know, above and beyond the powers of even kings and courts, but that are themselves the guiding principle of what they think humanity should become. And there is a belief system below it. Now, Oppenheimer was referring to an ancient scripture of the Bhagavad Gita. And, you know, that's not to say that, anything from the Bhagavad Gita is evil or bad, or, Robert Oppenheimer himself in quoting the dilemma of Vishnu being told to, do his duty and then taking on his multi-armed form and becoming I am become death and all of these things, the destroyer of worlds. It's a very scholarly and beautiful book to understand. And again, understanding is a technology. And that's why the ancient mystery schools kept that from common man. They treat us like children that cannot have like sharp scissors, because if we run around we might hurt ourselves, or they just want to be the ones with the technology to do things whilst we can't. And so I'm saying that understanding, it's the problem is not in the ancient scriptures or the belief systems, but it's the people that weaponize these things into secret societies and military plans that really hold humanity back. Because it's good to be defensive and strategic, but when you're doing that at the expense of all of humanity and you're trying to shape it in your likeness and image, I've got a bit of a problem with that, I'm afraid. I have a bit of a problem with that. So ladies and gentlemen, this is where we're going to beginning. This is where we are going to begin to tie up Storytime 9, just to again hammer home this point that the elites have a belief system that goes back to the most ancient times, and their feeling that their secret information makes them better than us, like their secret technology makes them superior to us, is problematic. And we need to keep an eye on it, because we're a part of this system that is sometimes right in front of us and is known to those who know, but to the average person not always so clear. And the one thing that needs to be made extremely clear is that these elites have this function called continuity of government, or continuation of government, that for them is the rules that supersede the rules. So that you and I agree on, that's the common rules, and they think that their rules, their ends justify the means of superseding the rules that we collectively agreed on. And that means that we're not in control of our destiny if we're not careful, because rich, powerful people in charge of technology, thinking that we're too childlike and dumb to think for ourselves and understand and make choices for ourselves, is really what has been the highlight coming in every single time, whether we're talking about JFK or UAP cover-ups or continuation of government. This is really why we have story time. It's just to inform us of these little dots that when they link together make a very striking image. And you know, it's not making an image of a beautiful heart with a smiley face, it's making the image of some very dark future for humanity. Tell you what, one last thing I'll leave us with before we wrap up. I was saying that the part of this whole system of continuation of government talks about deep underground military bunkers and tunnels. So it's very true that there are secret tunnels that link all kinds of things in every part of the world. But I made the claim earlier that one of the most successful and early pioneers of this technology was the United States Air Force. Now, the story there would be simply, oh, you know, we need tunnels for nuclear missiles, and again, to withstand strikes and all these things here. But some of these tunnels, we know, link these underground military bases. Denver is linked to this and that, and the White House is linked to other places, the Pentagon to other places. And although we've got, you know, like today's day and age, these, I'll show you here on screen. This is Elon Musk's borer. This is his boring machine. And basically this is a really big, you can see the front end. In fact, the biggest one that I can remember is the Alice boring machine. And this is designed to make tunnels. Oh yeah, look how big this one is. Evergreen. This is the Alice range. So they make them to spec for you. If you got a few million lying around. But look how big this one is at the moment compared to the one we were looking at from Elon Musk, from the Boring Company. But these diggers are still traditional diggers. In other words, you can see they got the teeth and they got the, you know, you can see that they have mechanisms for grinding up and pushing through the rock this way. But what the United States Air Force was dealing with instead was what they at the time would call conflagrators. Conflagration is when you basically melt something, bring something to such a temperature that it begins to melt. Not burn, but just melt, conflagrate. And it's usually very hard materials. And so the boring machines that the United States Air Force was using, let me see if I can call it up for you, because we have a few pictures of some of the prototypes. For example, the one that they used in Skull Mountain. So let's call that up. Skull Mountain, United States Air Force tunnel boring machine. Excellent. So here's a nice image of it here. Okay, now unfortunately, as I said, this is from way back in 1980 something, so the picture's not very big, so I'm going to have to blow it up here for you guys. Let me bring it on screen if it's not already. Now, what you're looking at here is not a traditional boring machine. We're getting indications from people that have worked on these secret projects saying that these boring tunnel machines, now remember this is the 80s, we were looking at Alice and we were looking at the boring tunneler of Elon Musk that had these great big teeth, but the one in the front of this is powered by, in later versions, as I said, this is just a prototype, would be powered by very high density energy platforms like nuclear power plants and things like that. And this energy would be directed to the front end of the machine that would basically melt its way through the rock. And what was interesting about conflagrating the rock is that it would melt the edges and make a perfect curve, and that would immediately reinforce the tunnels that they were making. And obviously this required large amounts of power, but they were able to dig kilometers and kilometers of tunnel, making incredibly huge underground cities that can support thousands and thousands of people. And it's a feat of nature that, again, in the 70s and the 80s we were doing. You can imagine today the size of the tunnels and the cities that we can build underground, and how deep we can build them as well. And this goes hand in glove as well with continuation of government, because they're the ones that believe that they can withstand whatever cataclysm happens on the surface of the earth. They don't care about anything on the surface. Anything important for them can still be found underground, and even the worst cataclysm, and that's why even the worst cataclysm won't affect them, is what they think. But the terrible thing is that they don't understand the cost of the planet for hundreds, if not thousands of years to come. And not only that, but they're gambling because they feel that they're safe. They're more likely to make rash decisions and gamble our our lives away, so to speak. So these continuation of government programs need to be scrutinized. They need to be looked at and understood, and the people in charge actually do owe us a public explanation about really what their intentions are. And we as collective humanity should also be making decisions that affect us as well, and not just being, in a certain sense, second fiddle to some secret group that at the snap of some finger of some emergency that they themselves may have created or not, suddenly take not only our rights away, but do so in the name of protection. We'll protect you, we'll be there to save you, we'll be there to help you. But without any clarity, were they the ones that actually caused the problem in the first place? And that's why we started with Elon Musk and Yacarino being elected as the head of X Corporation and Twitter. How can we trust this person when their track record is that of not an open and free world, but rather a more controlled and ordered world, and as Klaus Schwab would say, a more angry world? Of course we're angry. We're angry that we can't feed our families and work and live in peace. And that our leaders are not listening to us. I think France, for example, is a really excellent example, a really prime case example of just people being so fed up with the government that they've just been protesting for years. I mean, from the Gilets jaunes to now, the only thing that sort of slowed them down was, again, government saying, "Oh, now there's Corona. Now you can't come out your houses." But again, that didn't even stop. Many of them continued. And you can see that the people do not want the direction that powers that be are taking us. This is why we have story time, to highlight like all these interesting things like Rex 84 and continuation of government, and again, how continuation of government could even be summoned for something like shooting down these UFO or UAP things like the Chinese balloon and other identified objects in the skies of North America. That constitutes somewhat, some could argue, there's emergency threat in the sky. Okay, great. Let's now suspend the Constitution and really, shape the world the way we think it should be. Yeah, that should be a decision that we make collectively. So Storytime 9 concludes with that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. We went a little bit longer than usual. We did a 2-hour story session, but it's just as juicy, right? Important too. So that's where we're going to wrap up. Again, just saying that Elon Musk, as great as he does some things, is also needing to be criticized for others. One of them has been putting someone from the World Economic Forum as head of his enterprise, and this person representing some of these elitist, unelected powers that kind of shadow over us. And the most extreme example of that being the continuation of governments, or the continuity of governments, depending on which part of the world you come from, because basically you have no idea what awaits you when that flip of the switch goes. And that doesn't sound like a free will to me. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Stay human. Enjoy your week to come. Thank you again for just being a part of Storytime 9. Storytime 10 is going to be a big one. We have so many cool things. And just a reminder that you can catch this show again on YouTube at the Prime Matter Podcast. There's no the Prime Matter Podcast on YouTube. If you want to send us an email, primematterpodcast@gmail.com. I don't see any questions, so I'm just going to assume there weren't any. If not, please feel free to send them to me throughout the week as this information slowly sinks in. And we hope you enjoyed it. If you do, do the usual, like, subscribe, comment, interact. It's always nice to hear from you guys and to share the experience with just everyone in general. Otherwise, I'd just go sit in a cupboard and talk to myself. But Storytime 9 has been a great pleasure. Storytime 10 is going to be super, super great. And the one last thing I just wanted to put a little pin in case you maybe missed it, is that Storytime 9, this one we just did now, begins to open the doors for us into the concept of mystery schools, into the concept of spirituality, into the concept of ancient origins. Because, as I said, the elites not only keep technology from us, but ancient knowledge and wisdom. That's what makes them elite, because knowing the game, the rules of the game, makes you better at it. And if you can keep those rules from everyone else, you stand a good chance of coming out on top whilst everyone else just flounders about. So I just wanted to mark that this is really the point where I want to start bringing your attention to not just policy papers and not just news reports and not just old videos and things like that, but really to start bringing in the idea of mystery schools and esoterica and spiritualism. And we're talking about UFOs and things that are almost beyond belief. Time manipulation, physics manipulation, consciousness manipulation. So it would be an unjust thing to not really go deep and really drink of the cup of knowledge. And so that's why I just wanted to make that little sticky note, put a pin in, because as we go forward, we'll be dealing with these concepts a lot more, because they'll become more front and center, and you'll see that consciousness and UFOs and our ancient origins have this incredible arc and link. But we'll save that for story time number 10. Ladies and gentlemen, love you all, and thank you so much for joining us from this beautiful part of the world. Africa greets you to the new week, and we will see you next week, roughly the same time or place. Keep in touch on our Discord as best as we can. We'll try and keep to the same time, but ESCOM and our power situation makes that a little bit difficult. So without further ado, thank you again. Much love, much light, and have a blessed one. Catch you all soon.